Hi, my name is Beverly Bolnick, Vice President of Sales and Marketing at NMP, and I would like to welcome you to National Mortgage Professional Magazine's webinar titled, Don't Let Today's Compliance Guidelines Determine Your Level of Success, sponsored and presented by TagQuest. I would like to thank all of our webinar attendees for taking the time out of their busy days for this very valuable and informative webinar and our ongoing series of webinars. Today's webinar will be conducted by Caleb Guillory, President of TagQuest, Inc., a direct marketing and business consulting firm based in Medford, Oregon. Caleb has been in sales for 15 years, real estate for 12, and marketing for 10 years, with his primary focus on the mortgage industry. He grew up in a small town in Oregon called Eagle Point. With a big vision, he moved to Seattle when he was 22 and spent a few years in the auto industry, beginning at age 19. It's sort of like boot camp for salespeople, as Caleb says. By the time he was 24, he was in charge of the finance department. This is where Caleb found his passion for finance and why he has enjoyed working with mortgage professionals. At age 26, Caleb realized his big vision wasn't being fulfilled in the auto industry, and that's when he took the leap into direct marketing full-time, and he's been working with professionals like you ever since. If you have questions during the webinar, please be sure to ask them in the Questions tab in your GoToWebinar console. And we'll try to get to as many questions as we can at the end of the webinar. Also, we will be sending out the PowerPoint presentation and a copy of the recording tomorrow to everyone who registered for the webinar. So you can view it again, and you have the PowerPoint for future reference. Before we get started, we have a few questions that we wanted to ask you. So all of these questions, we're asking you how confident you are on a scale of 1 to 5. So this first question that's up on your screen, how confident are you about your knowledge of TRID guidelines and how they relate to your marketing? If you could answer on your screen right now, I'll give you a few seconds to vote and then I'll share the results with you. Okay, I'm going to give you a few more seconds, then I'm going to close up the poll and show you the results. Okay, I'm going to close it up now, and I'm going to share the results with you. So 8% of you said not confident at all. 25% of you said not very confident. 46% of you said somewhat confident. 17% of you said quite confident. And 5% of you said very confident. So hopefully that's the goal here, is to make you a little bit more confident. All right, we're going to bring up our next question. How confident are you that the leads that you buy are in compliance with all federal regulations? You can answer that on your screen. I'm just going to give you a few more seconds to vote, and then I'm going to close that one up. Okay, I'm going to close that up, and I'll share the results with you on that one. So 21% of you said not confident at all. 26% said not very confident. 31% said somewhat confident. 13% said quite confident, and 10% said very confident. Okay, and we're going to just do one more question, and then I'm going to turn things over to Caleb for the presentation. How confident are you about the effectiveness of compliant marketing campaigns? Okay, I'm going to close this poll up now and share the results for this last question with you. 5% of you said not confident at all. 24% of you said not very confident. 44% of you said somewhat confident. 19% said quite confident, and 8% said very confident. All right, thank you so much for participating in the polls. And without any further ado, I'd like to turn things over to Caleb Guillory.
Thank you, Beverly, for that wonderful introduction, and thanks everyone else for attending today. I know that compliance is important to us all, and so is keeping our businesses flourishing. So let's see if I can show you how to kill two birds with one stone. Stay in compliance and grow your business a little faster than you were hoping. First, I'm going to jump through our agenda real quick. Before we get started, I've got a brief overview just of what we'll be covering in the webinar today. We've got a brief history lesson just as it relates to today's regulations, like TRID coming out next month, credit data, the agencies listed here in front of you, and most importantly, your marketing and how it pertains to your marketing. I'll briefly run over the governing agencies that are relevant, not only to grow your business and attract new clients, but also to stay in compliance with federal regulations like TRID. As you can see on your screen here, we're going to discuss who regulates the mortgage industry, who regulates TRID, what that is, where it came from, and how you can use it to your benefit. We'll discuss the CFPB and their role in TRID and in your marketing campaigns. I'm going to try and stick with the facts today and not my opinions. I know your time is valuable, so I'm going to cram as much usable information into our time as I can. I'll finish up with how you can use TRID and all the new guidelines to develop a marketing strategy that will keep clients coming into your office and hopefully the CFPB off of your back. We've also recently acquired some new information through one of the major credit bureaus that I'll show you. It'll show you how to use your marketing campaigns to stay in compliance with all sorts of guidelines, including TRID. So let's start off with a quick overview of the agencies involved and where they came from. First is the FTC. That was the biggest one before the CFPB came out. The Federal Trade Commission. It's an independent agency of the United States government. It was established in 1914 by the Federal Trade Commission Act. The FTC investigates complaints made by consumers, businesses, or even reports in the media. The FTC has the power to investigate and prevent deceptive trade practices like false advertising and other forms of fraud. The FTC also allows courts to keep their authority and uses its staff as the prosecutors. In the 90s, the FTC launched what they called a fraud sweep against telemarketing agencies, filing multiple claims simultaneously, actually taking down over 100 business opportunity scams. Next is the Federal Communications Commission, or the FCC. Again, it's an independent agency of the United States government, created by the Communications Commission Act in 1934. It was put in place to regulate interstate communications by radio, television, wire, satellite, telecommunications, that's the important one, and cable in all 50 states. The FCC is funded entirely by regulatory fees. It was created for the purposes of promoting safety of life and property through the use of wire telecommunications and radio communications. The FCC oversees the protection of consumer privacy under the Communications Act of 1934. Now, in 1996, Congress enacted the Telecommunications Act. What this did was loosen up the rules of the original Communications Act in 1934, and subsequently in 2006, the FCC faced national scrutiny on both diversity and NSA wiretapping, which I'm sure you guys have heard of recently in the news. Since then, they faced even more scrutiny about their position on protecting consumer privacy and on how to monitor the internet, or maybe how they're not monitoring the internet yet. I've included the FCC because for the past few years there's been a trending marketing product called live transfers, which are all governed by the FCC. It's actually governed by the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, or the TCPA, which is underneath the FCC and all their interstate communications regulations. Next we have the FCRA, the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Again, it's a United States federal law. It was passed in 1970 to form the base of consumer credit rights in the United States. The FCRA mandates that creditors report complete and accurate information to all the credit reporting agencies. It mandates that credit reporting agencies are not allowed to keep negative information on consumers for any longer than roughly 7 years, and under FACTA, or the Fair and Accurate Credit Transactions Act, which was a 2003 amendment to the FCRA, consumers are entitled now to 1 free credit report per year per bureau. The FCRA will come into play a little bit later when we get into talking about credit data and how you can use it in your marketing campaigns. Next is TILA, the Truth in Lending Act. Everyone's probably very familiar with this one. Again, it's United States law, passed in 1968. It was designed to promote the informed use of consumer credit. So basically it's saying that it wants everybody to use consumer credit. It also requires uniform or standardized disclosures of costs and charges so that consumers can shop for loans. TILA does not regulate the charges. They don't regulate the charges that may be imposed for consumer credit. The regulation prohibits certain acts or practices in connection with credit secured by a consumer and their principal dwelling, but not what can be charged for it. This is a common misconception with the Truth in Lending Act. That's why I thought I would throw it in. And of course, what would TILA be without RESPA? The Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, passed in 1974. By who? The United States Congress. It was created to stop undisclosed kickbacks between builders, lenders, realtors, and title companies. It used to be commonplace, and in some cases it still is. I can't tell you how many times I've heard a mortgage lender tell me they've never even had to market before because they always grew by networking and referrals. So RESPA put in place to clearly state what the consumer was paying for, and their goal was to facilitate competition within these industries to drive prices charged by the companies down by market demand. All these laws and regulating agencies brings us to today. And who's the big regulator now? CFPB. We're all familiar with them. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They started prosecuting in July 2011 as part of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street reform of 2010. The CFPB was designed to consolidate employees and responsibilities from several other federal regulatory bodies, including the Federal Reserve and the FTC. The CFPB's most pressing or original areas of concern were mortgages, credit cards, and other financial products. Its motive was to protect consumers from hidden fees, abusive terms, and deceptive practices. The CFPB's had an impact much more widespread than that. But for the sake of saving time for our conversation today, I'm going to keep it to our arena. Here's how it's affected the agencies and laws that previously governed the mortgage industry. Here I put together a quick timeline and breakdown of how CFPB, some of the ways the CFPB is impacted all the agencies we just talked about, the FTC, the FCC, the FCRA, TILA, RESPA, all the ones that we've gone over so far. In 2012, the FTC voted approving, they call MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding. It's voted 4-0 in favor for the two agencies working together. The MOU outlines the working relationship between the two agencies, the FTC and the CFPB, and is designed to coordinate efforts to protect consumers and avoid duplication of federal law enforcement and regulatory efforts. In 2012, the FCC and the CFPB announced actions against mortgage advisors concerning the Mortgage Act's and Practices Advertising Rule, Regulation N, and other applicable laws. In 2015, the FTC and the CFPB signed an agreement to coordinate efforts, protect consumers, and avoid duplication of federal law enforcement. So they've been working together. It took them a few years, 2012 to 2015, but they did finally come together and commit to non-duplication of the federal laws. The Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, in 2014 entered what we call the privacy enforcement arena under the authority given to them by the Dodd-Frank reform. And in 2014, the FCC imposed $10 million in fines against a couple of communications companies for failing to protect consumer data. And the FCC is just beginning to explore its authority under the 2010 reform. In 2011, TILA's general rule making authority was transferred over to the CFPB. So effective July 21st, 2011, the CFPB was the authority on all the rules concerning TILA. On that same day, RESPA administration enforcement administration and enforcement was transferred from HUD, or the Department of Housing and Urban Development, to the CFPB. So July 21st, 2011, the CFPB took over authority for both RESPA and TILA. In 2012, CFPB issued a statement that effective, this was November in 2012, so then effective January 1st, 2013, a couple of months later, the CFPB will assume responsibility for enforcing the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Now you're starting to see some distinct differences between the old federal regulators, how they operated, and how the CFPB operates today. Some pretty great differences. The similarities that the federal regulators had, FTC, the FCC, FCRA, they're all formed under United States government. They were all enacted to protect consumers from fraudulent and predatory business and marketing practices. They're also all funded by the government. But the important part to keep in mind is that they all work in the same fundamental principles when it comes to policing their policies. Someone needs to complain or be brought in front of a court based on someone else's rights being infringed upon, which is the same model currently used in most other laws today, except maybe traffic court or traffic fines. All the other laws are policed in the same fashion. Someone has to complain in order for anything to be done about a law being broken. For example, my wife works in city government. She works in the planning department and has for about the past 10 years or so. During her time, one of the positions she held was to take people through the process of building and putting up signs. To me, nothing that she's ever done working for the city is as humorous as this, because the people building the signs have no idea what the laws are around building and putting up any of the signs. And the best part of it is that it also includes the sign companies. So these companies are in business putting up signs, and they're not even familiar with the local laws, how big the sign can be, where it can go, when you have to get your neighbor to approve it, how much time you have to construct it, where they're prohibited. I've even had the pleasure of hearing some of these sign company representatives get completely livid in the city office because they already took an order for some tens of thousands of dollars for a sign they're not allowed to build. And now they have to go back to their client and tell their client they didn't know the rules, and they're going to have to come up with a new plan to get the sign put up. This cracks me up because in the mortgage business, if you didn't know what interest rate your client qualified for, or if you didn't know what products different people had available to them, you wouldn't last a day. In the sign world, most of those people end up sneaking off and going and putting up their signs anyways, keeping their fingers crossed that no one would complain. And in fact, most of these cases, unless you upset your neighbor or block somebody's view or do something else to make someone complain, the sign's going to stay up. Other industries have so much less scrutiny than the mortgage business does. It's crazy. It's crazy to think what would happen to the mortgage would be like if everyone acted like sign companies. The rules from city to city change. They change from county to county, state to state. How could anyone be expected to keep up with all these rules, right? Well, that's not how the mortgage industry is regulated anymore, is it? I agree, things got out of hand in the 2000s, I've heard stories from clients over the years of people showing up at their office. They had locks and chains around the front door, so clearly there was some major changes coming, and because of how bad lending practices had gotten, it was definitely time for a change. And for the first time in history now, there's an agency out there aggressively looking to find companies, to find and fine companies that are out of compliance without somebody first coming forward. That's the CFPB. Or it all started with the Dodd-Frank Act. It's also known as Consumer Protection, or sorry, the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform. It's also known as the Consumer Protection Act, which provides, quote, consumer protections with authority and independence, end quote. It creates a new independent watchdog that's housed at the Federal Reserve with the authority to ensure American consumers get the clear, accurate information they need to shop for mortgages, credit cards, and other financial products. You know, the ones the CFPB was most concerned with when they started. Also, they wanted to protect consumers from hidden fees, abusive terms, deceptive practices, or as they call it in the mortgage business, predatory lending. Now, this little small agency you've heard of, the CFPB, it's funded by the Federal Reserve, not the U.S. government. Its chairman was appointed by the President himself with a signature from the Senate. But just like the Federal Reserve, the government doesn't have a whole lot of fast authority to regulate the CFPB. It's the new watchdog with the authority to act fast without following the standard court process. You remember the FTC, the FCC, they all follow the same court process anybody else would, but they get to use their own employees as the prosecutors. CFPB gets to dodge those, and they get to fast track it. Integrated disclosures is talking about TILA and RESPA and how they're integrating with the GFE and the loan estimates. The CFPB was put in place to protect consumers, just like the other federal agencies were. It's not really regulated by the government like the other ones were, which people have their own personal ideas about. CFPB has the authority to ensure American consumers are getting that clear and accurate information when shopping for a mortgage. And they have the authority to protect them from abusive terms, hidden fees, and deceptive practices. All things that needed to happen after the late 2000s. What we have today is a bit more drastic than just that. TRID is bringing two rules together and adopting new forms and rules to regulate both of them. Or should I say it? What is TRID? TILA RESPA Integrated Disclosures. I got an out-of-office reply from a client last week, said they were going to TRID training. So it's coming out in October. Combining TILA and RESPA into TRID is the CFPB's way of assuring consumers they're getting the necessary information when they're signing lending documents. There's so many lengthy laws and rules when it comes to lending. There's no way a consumer can be as knowledgeable as you lenders are. That's why there's an industry built around informing consumers about the rules, the regulations, the laws, so they can make informed decisions. It's like any other industry that has salespeople in it. The only reason to have salespeople in any industry is when the rules or options are so vast that a consumer would find it easier to pay someone, like a professional like yourselves, to do the homework, get licensed, listen to their wants, needs, and help them make an informed decision. Our economy depends on the mortgage industry being successful, so we do have a feather in the hat on that one. You've all heard of mortgage-backed securities. It's a world economy issue. It just happens to make a huge difference here at home in the U.S. As long as homeowners are making their mortgage payments, our economy is doing okay. But like you saw back in the late 2000s, when homeowners stopped making their mortgage payments, our whole economy goes in the gutter. That's why large companies like General Motors and Fannie Mae get federal assistance when things like that happen, and why consumers get federal assistance to keep buying homes, refining homes, to keep their mortgage payments going on time. So things got a little bit out of hand in the 2000s, and there were a few bad apples in the mortgage industry taking advantage of consumers using predatory lending tactics, and it shook up the whole nation, and it made consumers aware of the industry, made them aware of how lucrative it could be, and how much as a consumer they need to know before making a decision to purchase or refinance a home. I've personally taken the pleasure of reading the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the TCPA, TILA, RESPA, TRID. Mind you, they're all great reads. What I've realized most from reading all of these is how much people don't know, and ignorance doesn't hold up in court. I read recently that the CFPB has more consumer data than the NSA. I don't know about you, but that's a lot of data. The CFPB is a private entity that's not regulated by the U.S. government, at least not quickly. It's like the Federal Reserve. In fact, it's under the Federal Reserve. So the government doesn't directly oversee how it's ran. There are some tech companies out there that are refusing to disclose their processes, procedures of securing data, so that even their own employees can use ignorance as a clause if they ever had to go to court. But the government isn't very receptive to this practice, and they're currently working on passing new laws making it mandatory for these tech companies to disclose their processes of securing data. So what all these agencies and rules and laws come down to is protecting consumer data. We here just went through the ringer with one of the credit agencies, and it dawned on me while I was sitting across the table from a real nice guy. He worked at one of the credit bureaus for over 20 years. It dawned on me that all these rules and regulations are to try and protect personal information. The FCRA, the TCPA, TILA, RESPA, now TRID. And I realized something brilliant. They're all after the same thing. Everyone's trying to get to the same thing: information security, specifically with consumer data. So let's do something about it. If everybody wants to do the same thing, they're all after the same thing, there's only one move left to make. Let's play ball. So what are we going to do in the wake of all these new rules and regulations and TRID? We're going to generate more business. TagQuest was recently awarded the status of a fully authorized agent with one of the major credit bureaus, which is as high as ranking as you can get in our arena. And I have to tell you, what an experience that was. Like I said, I had the opportunity to sit down face-to-face with a rep from the bureau for an entire day and talk about compliance, data, where it came from, how it got started, how we've gotten to where we are, and what's to come in the future. It was one of the most eye-opening experiences in my life. With that new insight into the federal regulation of credit data, it's given me the ability to understand why I think the CFPB is creating new laws like TRID, and more importantly, how you guys can not only stay in compliant, but use the tools that you have at your disposal as lenders to generate more business. Now, as a lender, whether you're a banker or a broker, you have access to extremely specific information to target consumers for your marketing and to generate new business. You have access to credit data. Only lenders can access credit data. Insurance companies can. Other than that, if you're not, the rule is if you don't lend money to a consumer, you can't use credit data. Now it comes with its own set of rules and regulations. But at the end, they're all working together to eliminate consumers from receiving offers they don't qualify for. And as a result of that, for you lenders, you're only reaching out to people who are already pre-qualified for your products, saving everybody time and money. Another rule of that is if you're going to use credit data, the rule is you have to give the consumer a firm offer of credit. Now conversely, there's a funny rule. If you give a consumer a firm offer of credit, you have to use credit data. That way we know they qualify. Those rules go hand in hand. The biggest rule I noticed with TRID is the 3-day rule. It seems to be the one, at least to me, that stands out the most. The 3 days for a lender estimate and 3 days to give them some kind of an accurate lender estimate. And then at document signing, you have 3 days for a right of rescission for the borrower. Now these two rules can probably mess up a pipeline if you're not careful. Rates are changing fast, daily, hourly. Now there's less loyalty in the business, in the mortgage business today than there ever has been. If rates go up, people automatically think they can just go call another lender and they'll get a lower rate. They don't understand rates are governed by a world economy. It's about as predictable as a tornado in Kansas. When rates change, we all have to adjust and move on, losing some loans, but hopefully gaining others. With credit data, you can use credit data to defend yourself against these three-day TRID rules as part of your marketing, or get back to using it if you've used it before. It's been a little while. Credit data has much more strict guidelines around its use, but the guidelines match perfectly with the Dodd-Frank Act, with TRID, with the FCRA, with the FTC, with all of these people, all of these laws and all of these agencies. See, what the rules are doing is making sure that your borrowers qualify for and receive proper disclosures for their loans. Well, if you pre-screen your market that you make beforehand, you already know they qualify. And they're not going to go run off to someone else because you've got them sold on a very specific product to fit their very specific needs, wants, and desires. And they're not going to be able to just run across the street to somebody else that's going to do that kind of work for them. As a marketer, it's my job to keep you guys informed of what's available to you. Using credit data, following the guidelines that go along with credit data, putting together a campaign where you pre-select, you pre-qualify your borrowers. In the consumer's eyes, you've taken the time to make sure you're not wasting their time before you even send them a letter or make a phone call, reach out to them about their options. You care about their well-being, not just slamming them into a loan. It's a win-win for you and for the borrower. After talking with our rep over at the credit bureau that day, this became extremely clear to me. As a marketer, I keep you aware of what's available for you to use to acquire more business. And as one of the nation's most compliant marketing firms, we go even further. We also try and keep you aware of ways to stay in compliance with your own guidelines while acquiring new business and hitting your growth goals. So, TRID says you have to give borrowers 3 days. You got 3 days to get the borrower a lender estimate, right? How much easier is that going to be when you pre-qualify every one of your prospects with credit data ahead of time? Not just credit score. I'm talking about loan amount, revolving debt amount, income, loan to value, loan origination date. There's hundreds of select criteria. I understand currently the reverse mortgages are excluded from the 3-day TRID rule. There's also criteria for age, late payments, LTV, for those of you that are focusing on reverse. If any of you are focusing on FHA, you can use loan type, loan amount, LTV, credit score, revolving debt, total available debt to credit ratio, and target a prospect that's already going to qualify for your product. Unless they just lost their job or got divorced yesterday, you're going to have a product that's going to fit their needs. You'll have something to offer them because you've already pre-qualified this person. If you're sticking with conventional borrowers, how about using loan type, LTV, credit score, loan open date, and revolving debt? Target people that have equity and would be prime candidates for a debt consolidation refinance. Or how about targeting people who are currently in an FHA loan and qualify to switch over, or currently in an FHA, excuse me, and qualify to switch over to conventional loan. Get rid of their MIP. That's a big buzzword in the industry now. You can do all of this with credit data, pre-qualifying your borrowers. Now, these are extremely specific campaigns that require an understanding of the guidelines, but they also require an understanding of the data that's available to you. The campaigns personalize your marketing. Personalized marketing is more effective than commercialized marketing. TRID's 3-day loan estimate isn't going to be a problem if you're pre-screening your prospects. And then there's a 3-day rule at the end of signing. If you're pre-screening your prospects and you give them a personal offer, you reach out to them, you did the research before you reached out to them, they don't know that they're on a list of people. All they know is that you're trying to get in touch with them because you did your homework and you believe they qualify for something great. The 3 days to rescind your offer isn't going to make a big difference in your pipeline. Rates might be volatile. I have clients right now that are afraid to even lock loans because they just don't know what rates are going to do on any given day. I refied a while back, and my lender was afraid to lock because they could go down. But then they're so afraid because they could go right back up again. Credit data can come to your rescue here too, because you're using very specific criteria. You're only reaching out to people who are pre-qualified for your products, for your offer, and you're creating your market. You're creating your own market, and it's going to be personal. And when I say personal, I mean personal like you're going to talk to every single person. I mean personal like when you talk to the people who respond, they're going to think they're the only person on your list. There isn't going to be a list. There won't be thousands of people that you're marketing to. In their eyes, they're the only prospect you have. It'll go something like, look, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I've taken some time to pre-qualify you before I reached out to talk to you about your options. I believe we can save you a lot of money on your payment, on your interest rate, or on your MIP, or your revolving debt, etc. You guys are going to have so many options for each prospect, you're truly going to know their situation before you even talk to them. And you're going to make an impression on them that it's going to last because you already know all their information. We're going to bring loyalty back to the mortgage business. And we're going to do it by personalizing your marketing campaigns. In the process of doing that, you're also going to be following all the new trade guidelines, FCRA, FTC, TCPA, the list keeps going. If you want to add more guidelines, you know they're going to add more guidelines. You're only going to make your marketing that much more specific and that much more personal and that much more effective. So you can use the federal guidelines to personalize your campaigns. What other lenders are out there taking the time to educate their borrowers? Probably not many. Now you can stand out from the crowd, take advantage of the regulations, increase your business, and hopefully keep the CFPB off your back. Beverly, that's all that I've got. If you want to finish up with some Q&A.
Absolutely. I can't speak. I don't know why. Absolutely. We do have some questions coming in, and if you have questions, please keep sending them in to us, and we'll try to answer as many of them as we can before the end of the webinar. If we don't get to your question, as I said before, we'll try to have someone from TagQuest get back to you in the next few days. I'll make sure that they receive your questions. I also am getting a few questions from people asking if we're going to be sending out the PowerPoint and the recording. We are going to be sending out both of those tomorrow to everyone who registered. Okay, so our first question for Q&A, where do I go to learn more about the regulations that were discussed on the webinar?
Oh gosh, good question. There's lots of places. CFPB.org.gov is probably the best one. Google can be your best friend. You can call us and we can give you a list of FTC has their own website, the FCC has their own website. The trick is knowing how all of these things work in conjunction with each other, because sometimes the rules overlap, and at the end of the day the CFPB is the one who trumps everybody else. So I would start there, go to their website, and then work your way backwards if there's any questions left over.
Okay, great. Our next question. What do you think about internet leads and how they compare to these new TRID rules?
Oh man. I don't know. Internet leads are another good question. Internet leads are extremely difficult when it comes to compliance because there's people all over the world that generate these leads. Unless you generate your own internet lead on your own landing page, if you're purchasing an internet lead, there's really no way for you to be 100% certain you know every word, every phrase, everything that was put in front of that consumer to entice them to put in their information and become a lead. So when it comes to TRID with Truth in Lending and RESPA, RESPA is talking about, fund transferring from one person to another, and there are giveaways and incentives that are out there online. I'm not sure that anybody is going to prosecute that, but then again, this is the first time we've had a watchdog, the CFPB, actively going out and searching for people that aren't following the rules. So internet leads are a sticky point, and I don't think they're going to get any better. We're probably going to have to go through some more legislation before there's clear rules on how you can and can't generate internet leads. For the time being, it's probably going to be, it's probably going to be a few months to a year or 3 before we hear any final word on them. But I would just advise to be careful who you're buying them from and make sure you work with a reputable company.
Okay. The next question, what do you think will happen with trigger leads after TRID comes out next month?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question. I meant to fit it in, but I ran out of time. So the trigger lead is a love-hate lead. Been around for 10 years or so. More, 15, gosh. the trigger is created when somebody has their credit pulled for a mortgage. So think about when you go to, you sign docs, and now you've got a customer that's got 3 days right of rescission after signing before you close or fund. I think the trigger lead may change the industry when TRID comes out because of that. You also need to know before you give your estimate in the beginning, you're going to have to know about your prospects. So I'm guessing you're going to pull credit, and there again goes another trigger lead. So you have to get it to them quick. If you're pulling credit first and then waiting and sending it to them, there's going to be other people that may be contacting your prospects before they even get your lender estimates from you. So it's definitely something that you want to be aware of, and I think that the trigger will have a great impact on the mortgage industry once TRID is out and all the rules are in place.
Okay, what's the process to get set up to use credit data, and how do I use it?
Well, there's a bunch of guidelines that have to be followed to use it. You can use it for just about anything as long as you follow the rules. It takes, depends on your company, it takes about 3 to 6 weeks to get set up with any of the 3 major credit bureaus. And it's just a matter of paying a fee and filling out some paperwork, and they come out and vet and make sure you're a real lender with a real license and you're actually writing loans. And then you can use it by all sorts of ways. Credit data for direct mail or telemarketing. There's different leads you can use. There's task customer monitoring products out there. There's tons of ways to use it. And again, when you use it, you can also make sure that you're following the new rules and regulations to make sure you're staying out of hot water.
Okay, and we're going to go use one more question here, and then if we didn't get to your question, we'll make sure that it's answered. The last question, you said something about making marketing personal. How do I do that?
Personalize your marketing. Multi-channel marketing is the newest, latest, and greatest wave that hasn't really come out yet. If you pre-qualify your customer with credit data, so you already know what kind of credit they have, what kind of loan they have, what their loan amount is, their loan open date, where they live, you know how much money they make. You already know everything about this prospect. And then you make it a point to reach out to them in multiple different ways. Instead of just doing a telemarketing campaign or just doing a direct mail campaign or just doing an email campaign, or maybe you're just working on social media. Combine all of those things together so there's no way that this prospect can't know that you're at least trying to reach out to them. The response rates go through the roof, and what we find is that the consumers that respond, the respondents, are much more open. That chip on their shoulder isn't there quite as bad, because when they call, A, you already know their information, which helps out a ton. But B, if you say you've sent them a letter and then you left them a voice message, the first thing you can ask them is about the mail that you sent them, and if they got your letter, the first thing you can ask them is if they got your message. So it's clear that you're trying to reach out to them, and it naturally creates a very personal feel to the marketing.
Okay, great. Well, I just wanted to thank you again, Caleb, for all the great information today, and TagQuest for sponsoring the webinar. Also wanted to thank everyone for taking the time to attend today, and we hope to see you on the next webinar. Have a great rest of the day.
Great, thank you.